And welcome to the Knowing Show, y'all. I actually had not planned to do an evening show on the weekends, and Carnella and I were chatting a couple weeks ago, and Carnella is an incredible, powerful, motivational speaker. She personally decorated the White House at one point. She has been on HGTV. She is gracing us with her presence today. She's actually a pastor as well. And so she's just like this powerful force of a human being, this wrecking ball. And I am so glad for her to come in and just honestly, y'all, bring a little bit of disruption. You know, for the most part on the Knowing Show, I will bring guests that I agree with, and those that maybe even go further in one direction or another. And I love learning, and I love bringing the conversations to the table for you and me both to sit and kind of be like, ouch, or ooh, or ooh. And like, why do I really think that? Because here's the thing. Anytime we're feeling annoyed or upset, or we feel just an emotion from what is being said in this show, usually that's revealing something to us, either something that needs to be healed. Maybe it's a value system. Maybe it's something even that is required for our next step in growth. It can show a myriad of things. So I invite you and encourage you to join us tonight with Carnella. Carnella, I am just so thrilled for you to be here. Thank you for joining us here on the Knowing Show.
Christine, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited about what God is going to do on the show tonight. And so when we met through one of the social media sites, we both felt a divine connection when we talked. And so we know that there is greater works for both of us to do. And I'm just excited how it takes place. So let's go.
Let's go. Carnella, I mean, the fact that you've served as a White House decorator in 2015. You had a guest appearance on HGTV. You've got your own podcast. You've served as the White House Southeast regional representative for small businesses. You've been working with executives and educators, entrepreneurs. It is astounding the breadth and depth. And then you also work at your church. And so I love this because my sweet and wonderful uncle, 3 weeks ago, he passed away in his sleep. And he was both lawyer and priest. And very rarely do you find people who are of such caliber on the professional side also having a spiritual connection with God and really knowing God at that level. And so I'd love for you to share kind of the transformation you yourself have moved through in your life. Like, okay, I'm Carnella, and I moved from A to B or A to Z maybe. And then just providing some context and story around that.
Sure. It actually started in my teenage years. Stepping back, actually, my grandfather was a pastor. My great-grandfather was a pastor. I'm surrounded by family members that are clergy. And my grandmother was what we would call a deaconess in the church, a mother in the church. And so that's what I grew up around. And you went to church, and they didn't take you, they went too. I grew up in that, and around my teenage years, I began to have dreams where I would see things and it would scare me. And so fast forward, during that time, it scared me so much, I asked God to take it away. Well, you never ask God to take away a gift that he gives you. And so later on, I learned more about that, more about the gifts God has given me. And I remember my bishop saying to me that those words, you never ask God to take away something he gives. And so I repented and asked God to give me strength to be able to go through that part of my life. But I always found myself gravitating to my faith. Whatever happens in life, I would gravitate to my faith, in my 20s when I was in college and work and whatever. And so that began to move me to a different place. And I remember a Sunday afternoon coming home from church and saying, God, I love studying your word. And he put in my heart to go to seminary. And I applied to several schools, but I ended up at Duke University. But right before then, I was having dreams again, a knocking at the door, and I kept saying, "What is this knock at the door?" And the knock was getting louder and louder and louder. And my pastor said, 1 Samuel 3:9 or 3:10, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." And I said, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." And kept going on, and I just felt this tug. And so I reached back out to my pastor, was like, "Hey, what am I supposed to do now?" I said what you told me to say, but the knocks are getting louder. It's from the outside. I had doorbell ringing and everything. And that was God speaking. See, God speaks to us every day. Are we listening? And it's not going to sound the same every day. So in that knocking and then the doorbell, I'm getting up in the middle of the night. Nobody's at the door. And so I went back to my pastor and I was like, "Okay, now what?" And he said, "Did you say what I told you to say?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay." I said, it got louder. Now it's on the inside of the house. The knocking is at the door inside the house. Like, it's loud. Like, literally, God is waking me up in the middle of the night, trying to talk. But he's speaking through ways I didn't quite understand them.
Right.
And so my bishop said to me, "It's time." And I said, "Time for what?" And he said, "It's time for you to go into ministry and someone will contact you." And I said, "Oh, that's what that was about." So I tell this story all the time because somebody else, God is nudging your heart for ministry. And, we all have ministry duties, but maybe he's calling you up a little bit higher. And so I said, "Okay, here we go." So I started training and everything. But long story short, I get to seminary. My classmates keep saying to me, "Are you going to start a church?" "Nope." "Are you going to start a church?" "Nope, that's not my heart's desire. I'm here because I love studying the word." So I thought.
Yeah.
And then in December 2020, I said, "God, we're going through this pandemic. My business is kind of upside down right now. What am I supposed to do with all of this? I'm finishing divinity school. My uncle has a health scare. No, I have a health scare. My uncle has cancer and he's tired and he's like, VA, I'm tired of y'all. Oncologists, I'm tired of everybody. I just want to go home. I got a praying group of family members." And we were like, "Okay, you want to go home? Hospice already been. He's good. Uncle, you already had that conversation with God?" "Yes, I'm good." I knew he'd given his life early. I just wanted to make sure that, everything was straight. I didn't want that on my dime, that I didn't ask the question. And, we went through that part. But God had me in rest for 3 months. That was the hardest 3 months of my life.
Wow. Wow.
He said rest. And then, so that was December. God and I had a whole lot of conversation about rest. And I kept saying, seeing, "Be still and know that I'm God." And I said, he said, "You already know that." Who I am. I said, "Be still." He said, "You already know that too. Just be." And I didn't know what it was like. I didn't. I asked God. I said, I don't know how to be, and I don't know what be looks like. And he said, "Rest in me and trust me." So he put me in timeout, basically, I like to say, for 3 months.
So Carnella, and for those of you who are just joining, Carnella, she's worked closely with the White House. She's served as a personal decorator for the White House. She also has been a representative for small businesses from the Southeast in the White House, but has also served as a speaker and coach for many executives. And so, Carnella, when you talk about this state of being and rest, that is like the antithesis of business entrepreneur mindset.
Yes.
Actually, it's so funny that we're even talking about this. And y'all, the topic for today is actually something that I'm excited to get to: how to parent our kids in a digital world. This is so incredibly important. And so this question actually is necessary for us to address before we can talk about how to actually be that parent that our kids need. Because the concept of rest is really the antithesis of success. And I was just writing about this earlier on Facebook and LinkedIn. And, our definition of success has to be brought into question in terms of what marks my life in terms of, oh, I've made it or I haven't, or where am I going? What's the road and the path that I'm taking? And so for you to talk about rest, I want to kind of define that, because I think a lot of us are on this road chasing these outcomes and chasing this destination where we say, I'm doing this for my family, but we don't have the relationship with our children where they feel safe enough to maybe even confide in us. Or we say, I'm doing this for my future, but we're killing ourselves and our physical body is deteriorating. So when we turn 60, we've got nothing left. So there's this real dissonance between what we say and how we live, and probably even between what we even think and then what we say and how we live. So I'd love for you to kind of lean into defining rest and what did that actually look like for you? Because I think this is an opportunity for all of us to look in the mirror and think, oh, what actually is a hallmark of success for me? And does rest actually have any place in there?
I'm so glad you asked this question, because a lot of times we don't talk about what rest really means. And for me, going to the White House was volunteering, being with the event planning team, decorating, being excited, God telling me no the first time I applied, telling me yes the second time, because he had prepared me along the way, and then having that HGTV moment. But in that, I was super tired. Because in 2015, things were, the housing market, we're recovering from the housing market. So, I'm going through this, and I go in houses as an interior designer. So I'm just recovering from that. And then, COVID happens and a lot of things happen. And you feel like sometimes you're just on a wheel. You're on a wheel. You're on a rat race as a business owner, and you're looking for a check or chasing a check or trying to see when is the check going to come, and did you really mail the check, and all of that. And so, as business owners, we struggle with rest. As leaders, we struggle with rest. And so, I was forced to rest. And I don't wish that on anybody, because it was a tough thing. When God puts you in time out, it's like forced arrest. So it could be your body getting sick. It could be you getting a cold, and you knew that you were feeling symptoms in advance, but you didn't stop to take care of yourself. Many times we take care of everybody else, but we put ourselves on the back burner, especially as entrepreneurs, caregivers. We put ourselves on the back burner and no more. So I was forced to learn rest in two ways. One, God put me there. And then two, while in divinity school, I had a class on a spiritual formation class. Well, guess what? One of our assignments was Sabbath rest. I struggled through that whole semester, but I learned so much about Sabbath rest. Sabbath rest is you don't do anything unless God tells you to move. It doesn't have to be a Saturday. It doesn't have to be a Sunday. It could be whatever day that you are willing to carve out and say, I'm going to spend this time dedicated to the one above. And when we learn to do that, that means you don't cook unless he tells you to cook. You don't move unless, that means you got to have stuff prepared in advance then, right? So if you have kids, wife, or spouse, you have to have things ready in advance. You don't work, because we can go into that, that's probably another show. We can go into that whole thing of you don't do anything unless he tells you to do it. How many of us stop to do that? You don't even have to be a business owner. You can be a mom. You can be a husband. How many times do we just stop and say, I'm going to take time for myself? So what I have learned that I share often is sometimes it's a simple thing as getting in the car and driving out. That is my dedicated time with God. I don't work on Mondays. Mondays are my off days. And people say, for real, you don't work on Mondays? No. Every once in a while, I feel myself adding something to my calendar and I get that nudge. You're doing it again. Pull back. Because usually Saturday, I'm somewhere. Yesterday, I was at a funeral. Sunday, I preach on Sunday. I'm the senior pastor at the church, and I'm the founder of the church and a nonprofit and the business stuff. So I have to find that space.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to stop and say, what is my Sabbath rest day? Start out small. Start out with a couple of hours. Start out with a half a day. You'll graduate. You start with a couple of hours, you'll graduate to a half day. You'll graduate to a whole day. The opportunity also to go to Israel and learn more about Shabbat and all these different places God has placed me in has taught me more and more about why rest is needed and how other cultures do it and how other groups do it.
Yeah.
And so you have to create your own place of rest and understand when you really rest, creativity comes. I remember us talking about this. Creativity comes in rest. If you would literally sit and do nothing but have a pen and paper ready for the answer that you've been asking for, you will be amazed at how many business ideas you have. Just don't try to do them all. That's where
Yes, I love that. Honestly, there's been so much creativity that has flown from those quiet moments and those quiet days. So I love that. I love that practice of just start with a few hours. You know, you don't need to try to make it be the whole day. And then the other thing, Carnella, that you said that I think is so beautiful is there's so much to glean from multiple different cultures and traditions and even religions. I mean, there's beauty to be found if we are curious about why people are doing what they're doing. So I'm grateful for that reminder of just the cultural element. I remember last year I went to Europe for a couple of weeks, and my intention was to go and glean from just the way that they live. And it really taught me this new element and addition to slowing down that is a goal. What's the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry is a book my sister read a couple years ago. And it's just that whole concept. I mean, the book title itself speaks to it, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And leading into this conversation around our children, if we are hurrying and we are operating off of our timelines or our habits even, or our to-do list, so much of those kind of sacred moments with our kids are, I mean, I don't have babies of my own, but my sister, she and her 3-week-old baby girl moved in with us at the time. And she was there for 2.5 years, and just kind of being the godmother of my niece. It's in the car picking her up from school is when those conversations happen. And it's like, am I turning on music and paying attention to her? Or, you know, it's like, am I turning on music or just kind of doing our normal routine, or am I really, really present? Because so often those car rides to and from school can be really, really sacred. And then to that point of eliminating kind of the hurry, I think even those days dedicated to the quiet allow for the presence and connection with our kids. So I'd love to talk about that a little bit in that regard. I got a message from someone today who said that they just found out that their 16-year-old daughter is pregnant. And they were just like, I don't know how to process this. And you know, it's a daddy, you know, his daughter. And so I want to talk about this in general. You know, we've got a whole generation who are forming their belief systems based on the internet in so many ways, and what friends are doing and saying. And tradition has really been stripped away from families that have tradition in and of itself were kind of like the cornerstones of culture. And now it's perhaps more so like the digital age is the cornerstone of our culture. And parents don't have much of a say in a lot of their children's lives now. And so I asked you this question, what's on your heart right now? And you said parents with their kids. And so it was just very timely and apt given the message I received earlier. So I'd like to spend some time with this, given that we as individuals are willing to take a pause in our busy lives, there's probably a lot that's going to unfold for connection points with our children. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. I don't have kids myself. People ask me this question all the time, and I say I have everybody else kids, and they laugh. And I say, no, seriously, I have nieces, nephews, people, kids in the church. Kids gravitate to me. I gravitate to them. I run away from them, then I come back. But I love kids basically, and picking up, you reminded me of picking up my nephew from school, and days I would pick him up, we had a routine, and my routine would be, how was your day, tell me something about it, and then we would go get ice cream, and I would go take him to one of the ice cream places, let him get whatever he wants, and we would have conversations as he's eating his ice cream. And so if we was in a hurry doing something else, he would remind me, or if other family members picked him up, he would say, Aunt Carnella always take me to get ice cream. And so he knew that was part of our thing. But I also used that to learn about his day. I would also play music in the car. And so I would have this certain songs or a couple of songs of my favorite songs. And I would play that song and we would just talk about different things. And he calls me, I'm working on my doctorate. So I'm a doctor preacher right now, is what he calls me. And so we would have different conversations about what he wants to do when he grows up and different things. But it was a way of opening the door for whatever was on his mind. And I would ask him, different questions just to see where he was. Did you do your homework last night? Did your mom have time, or do you need me to help you with it? It was little conversations. I used to do the same with my other nieces and nephews. And I learned, always leave that door open for them, because they may not say much in their younger days, but as they get older, they begin to know where they can go, who they can talk to. And so I began to notice, even my other nephew, how he would call me and we would talk about the Bible. And it's amazing how when we open that door, where it leads. And so, and he would talk about girlfriends to my mom, but he wouldn't necessarily talk about girlfriends with his auntie. He would talk about some basketball stuff and different things. So they know who they can come to. But I find that most of my nephews, whether they're older or younger, I'm opening the door for conversations. And sometimes it's real hard conversations that I might struggle with, but I gotta be open to it.
Yes. Right. Well, and isn't that an interesting point of perhaps the doorway isn't open for the kids to talk to us because we feel uncomfortable or because we don't know what the answer is. And I think that this is kind of a good mirror moment of, are we thinking that we need to know all the answers before
Right.
we engage with our kids? And I think that that's a really, really, and it could be kids by way of nieces, nephews. Like you have a really big influence. I mean, you were called up. You're the middle school in your area had a shooting, and they called you to come in and speak to the kids. So like you have a very profound impact in kids' lives right now, even though you don't have any of your own, Carnella. And I think that perhaps could even be. I just think that that's of equal importance and of equal value, regardless of having your own babies. And so I'm so grateful for that. And I think that that's actually a really important aspect of just leaving the door open and being okay not knowing the answer.
Yes.
I love that.
It opened the door. I spoke to one of the teachers about that shooting and how she felt, because we don't often ask the teacher how are they feeling. The shooting occurred, and I saw her social media post, but I was already um feeling the weight. My heart was aching because
Mm,
I was already feeling the weight of my community. And so I spoke to this teacher, and the teacher just shared the story about how, the kids were coming up to her, but she really didn't have a chance to process the way she wanted to, because the kids were coming one by one and one by one. So she actually shared the story about going home and just getting in the bed. And I said, do they have counselors for the teachers? She said, the school system brought in counselors and everything. And I just shared with her, you know, because you all need to be able, and I'm a Southern girl, so I'll say you all, you all need to be able to process this as well, because it is a weight. It is a heavy weight. And she was sharing that the weekend was coming, so that helped. And I talked to another school teacher, and she shared her concerns. How, because you're with these kids every day, 5 out of 7 days a week. And so how these kids are. And one of the things I remember her saying was they're good kids. They're good kids. And so I've watched in many instances where sometimes people just don't know what to say. You don't know what to say when I have another parent that called me and said, I'm dealing with a situation with my child and I'm not happy. How do I handle this best? And I said, one, you need to go breathe for a second, because emotions start to rise up. And when your emotions start to rise up, next thing you know, you are in a tense situation that closes the door instead of opening the door. And I said, so go take a break. She said, I rolled out, I called you from the car. And I just needed to talk it out. A lot of times, that's where you need to start first. When you get some news from your child that you're not happy about, take a break, go ride out, clear your head, and come back so that you're open to having that hard conversation, because you don't want to close the door and then the child never comes back to speak, or they remind you later in a conversation, you
yeah.
didn't even give me a chance to speak.
Mm,
And
mm,
so that's where we are in this digital age. We have to be more open. I'm not saying you're their best friend, because you're not. You're their parent, and there is a difference. But learn to be more open. I know you're disappointed. I know it's hurtful. Remember when you were that age.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember when you were that age.
And isn't that empathy of picking ourselves up and putting ourselves in the seat of someone else and viewing the world through their eyes?
Mhm.
Um, Carnella, what are some practices in addition to the ones you mentioned? Like if you were to give, 1 to 3 things for parents to really, like using this example of my friend who just found out that his daughter
Mhm.
is pregnant. What are some real connection points and practices that people could try, or even just maybe it's even exploring and creating new practices with your kids.
Mhm.
Uh,
Exactly.
what helps people know kind of some steps to take or questions to ask or practices to put in place? Like, where do I start if I find that out that my kid did something and I'm just like, oh my gosh, what then?
Something God would want us to do. First of all, you go to your child and you say, let's put a plan together. Start there, because then you just open the space You're basically saying, I'm not going to go through my emotions right now, because that's what they're expecting. They're expecting you to be mad, be angry, be all of that. I'm not saying hide it, but you went on a drive to release some of that so that you can
Mhm.
come back open and ready to receive. Go into that child, let them know that you love them.
Mm.
You may not be happy with the situation, but together we will get through this.
Yeah.
Show love. Show love.
Mm.
And I want to help you with this.
Yeah. I love that.
Hmm.
I want to
And
help
then
you with this. I'm going to come
I
alongside
want,
you.
right,
Mm.
because that's the same thing our Father wants from us.
Yeah.
When we're in a hard place, He wants to be right there with us. So do
Mm.
the same. And think about when you were a child and you did something that your parents were not happy about. And when they scorned you for it and yelled at you or whatever happened, how did you feel? Go back to that place. You know how you felt. Now, how would your child feel?
Yeah.
And don't do the exact same thing that they did. And the child already feels bad because when they had to come have a conversation that they didn't. And I've seen too many, even in my own family, where
Yeah.
my niece was pregnant. She hid it. She hid it
Oh, yeah.
because
Wow.
she didn't want it. She just kept wearing, I'm not giving the kids no ideas, so I don't want to say, but she hid it
Wow.
because she thought she couldn't talk to anybody.
Yes.
We're in days and times where social media, everything is expressed on social media. Our young people put everything on social media. Let's pull back and let's have some private conversations at home. Let's get with the young man's family.
Mm.
Let's
Mhm.
have those conversations. You might even need to go to counseling or to a leader at the church that's not going to judge that child, but
Mhm.
listen, as a family, how do we best handle this?
Mm.
Because it will open the door to other conversations that you will
Right.
need to have later in life.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so, so, so true. And I'm as you said this kind of at the outset of what you just shared, just this beautiful concept of how has God modeled parenting to us?
Yes.
And what a beautiful frame, like stepping back and looking at the example. And here's the thing, Carnella, I think that we talked a little bit about this earlier about how much it is tied to it being the way we react, the way we show up, the way we engage in every part of our lives, predicated in past experience. So, how are we parented?
Yes.
What was the reaction we would have experienced? You keep saying go back to think about how it was for you as a child. And I think it's really important that we actually do that homework of how did I feel? How
Mhm.
how then was my view of how God viewed me shaped as a result of how I felt like my parents viewed me?
Right.
Because we will, by our own intention or not, model that behavior if we haven't gone back and kind of done that homework to
Mhm.
sit in the seat of, okay, this was my experience as a child, and I see how I'm subconsciously mirroring that pattern that was modeled for me. I did this in my previous marriage, and I love my parents. They've been married for 40 years, and there were elements of their marriage that I did not want to model, but because I didn't set a new target, I inevitably played that role. And so we will do the same thing as parents if we don't set a new target, and that new target should be the modeling of how God actually does treat us as sons and daughters. And
Yeah.
that I'm so grateful you started with love, because
Mhm.
man, that And you mentioned earlier, like, go for a drive, like, do not have that emotional reaction. It's kind of like, put your own oxygen mask on first.
Exactly.
know?
Exactly.
Because if
Exactly.
we don't, we could do some real damage. We really,
We
really
can.
could. We can't take those words back
Mm-hmm.
in so many ways.
And when you go and take a drive, or I'm big on journaling, journal, close the door, get in a room, just be quiet, play some worship music, let God begin to speak to you, because he will give you the words to say in that situation, in all situations. If
Yes.
we would just go back to him, he would lead and guide us. And it's like he's waiting for us to do it. But too
Mhm.
often we don't. We take control and we try to fix it. And then we end up having to come back to him anyway. And so as parents, I strongly urge you in this digital age to really go and just
Mm.
sit with yourself. Think about how you felt. And I jokingly say, but then I'm serious at the same thing. Our parents raised us a certain way. And I remember I had to be home by 12 o'clock, this, that, and the other. I thought it was the worst thing in the world, back then. But now that I'm older, some of that I was like, okay, I agree with it. Some of it I didn't, but some of it I agree with now, because I said it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. It felt like punishment back then. But, look back over those things, reflect on your childhood, and you will dissect what worked and what didn't work. But what we have, I want to be careful how I say this. What we have found ourselves is, we found ourselves giving our kids more than we had. But is that the answer? No. Because what we end up doing is spoiling them, that nobody wants to be around them in
Mm.
some cases, or they can't even work a job because they got these rose colored glasses on, and
So
they don't want to listen to anyone. And when I come in contact with the young people, and being used to be I used to be a director in the corporate world, and I had to stop and tell young people, like, seriously, don't I close the door and give them real life experience.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
Speaking of which, last Sunday, I just did a big post on this. Last Sunday, we did a senior send off in my nonprofit. We did a senior send off. We had speakers to come in from the councilwoman came in, our representative. We had them to talk about people come in to talk about human trafficking, different speakers, budgeting. We talked about so much, but this is part of what I appreciated. The parents had to be there too. The parents were there, the kids were there, and you had adult speakers sharing real life stories
Yeah.
of when they went off to college
Yeah.
and what they learned, and the lesson and the wisdom they wish they had followed.
Mm.
We are in that place now where we need to have more conversation and get less screaming and yelling and being in our feelings.
Mm. Mhm.
And that's where we are.
And to your point about not having kind of like touch with reality of needing grit, and you will be told things you won't like. I think that years ago they did away with F, like on a test. They don't get Fs anymore. And it really is, it's a dangerous road that we're on with our kids.
Mhm.
And even I mean, I'm seeing it pop up in so many different industries. The trades, we've got all these people who have really cultivated their family trades business, and their kids don't want to take it over because they want to be YouTube influencers, not plumbers. And they don't see the value of working with your hands, much
Right.
like having the ability to actually get outside and do the hard work. Charlie, someone here in the chat mentioned, that's why raising your kids and having a farm, my darling and I are talking about that very thing of agriculture and ensuring that they actually get that level of hard work,
Mhm.
and working with their hands and being outside. And here's
Mhm.
the thing, Carnella, that is important for us to consider is what is the environment that we're welcoming our kids into when we say no screens?
Right.
They even want to come and participate? Are we creating a family culture that's life-giving and full of joy for them to then leave their room and come and engage with us as a family? Is
Right.
that even desirable to begin with? Because to your point, how much of it is actually filled with screaming, and it's actually a nice respite to go and get online and be with your friends or just zone out. We as
Mhm.
adults are tempted to do this with the phone. How much more so kids want to escape a reality of an unhappy home. And
Because
so,
they follow what we do. And if we don't set boundaries and expectations early, then it's a struggle to try to pull it back. But we have to be better as adults in the things that we do and expose our children to.
yeah.
I'm reminded of a nephew who said, Auntie, he was staying with me, and I said, "You got to pay a bill." I remember my parents saying that. I was like, "Why I got to spend my money to pay a bill? You the adult." Yeah, now I understand. And I said, "You have to pay a bill. You cannot go and stay anywhere for free." But when
Mm,
our parents did that to us, it taught us those life lessons. And so that's where we are. We have to teach kids life lessons now. They got the
mhm,
education, most of them anyway. They got that education piece, but are we teaching them life lessons so that they can stay on a job more than a year, or don't think it's robbery to just quit after 6 months? I
mm,
look at it and I say, I look at my nieces and nephews. My niece had more than 3 jobs in a year, and then I said, "Girl, that makes no sense. You
mm,
gotta build loyalty somewhere. Don't you know you may need those same people again?" And I've had to talk to so many mentees about this, but they think it's okay. I'm not gonna go there again. And then one had to end up going back to calling that same school that she left teaching. And
mm,
she said, she calls me auntie. She said, "You told me not to leave." I said, "I told you don't leave on bad terms." And that's bad terms when you just up and leave and don't give a 2 weeks notice. I'm
yeah.
still from the old school. You give a 2 weeks notice and you stay there in your 2 weeks. Don't just up because it's a
Yeah,
better pay. Is it going to be better long term? And a lot of times it's not. But we have to teach our kids these life skills
right.
because later on it's going to affect their family, their household. It's going to affect the family, not just their family, but the
Right.
family as a whole. What are we teaching our kids?
What are we teaching our kids? That's so good. And to our initial kind of conversation around creation, are
Mhm.
we creating values? Here's our family values. Here's our family's mission. Here's the environment that we're actively creating, and you play a part in that.
Right,
Really teaching our children that they're a part of an ecosystem of family that
yeah,
is so invaluable. Like allowing, I think that's the dynamic and duality of you have autonomy because that's actually super important for developmental reasons and cultivating those life skills. Yet you're not the star,
right.
and allowing for them to know that they actually fit into a larger nucleus. They are themselves are not the nucleus. And that's something that is really uncomfortable, that there's a lot of I think that there's just really something missing in that regard, Carnella. It's actually easier to
Mhm.
just pop the lollipop in the kid's mouth and turn on the show and just pacify them and not ever have to engage with emotions. It's interesting, we ourselves need to cultivate emotional intelligence so that then we can teach our children to do the same, because otherwise you've got me, my own little kid is coming out against this little kid, and it's
Mhm.
like, man, who's the adult here? Well, none of us really are, because
Right.
we haven't actually taken the time to heal in the first place and to be able to really be an adult and have something valuable to teach. I want to ask a couple questions that folks have
Mhm.
offered along the way. I want to ask about the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
The Sabbath, do you have a strong stance around Sabbath is Sunday? I know some cultures believe Sabbath is Saturday. I know you honor Mondays. Like, how do you think around Sabbath in terms of kind of, I don't want to use the word because I don't want to give my stance away. How do you think about it in terms
Sure.
of
I would say the day that you're not working. So if you work on a Saturday, then Sunday would be your Sabbath.
Yeah.
But if you work Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you're off on Friday, then Friday is your Sabbath. It's the day that you're not working. So pick whichever one. And then I will always send you back to ask God, what does he say about Sabbath for you? You know,
what does God say?
What is your Sabbath? My Sabbath is Monday, because most of the time I'm doing church stuff, school stuff, whatever. So I find Monday is my Sabbath, and I try to stick to it unless, I have something that's going on. But then he'll nudge me when I start to get off course. Like, you put in work on it and you can do the work the other day. Understand priorities here.
Yeah.
Understand priorities. Because you need a day to rest and connect with the one above. And so you sit with him and he'll make it clear. I tell my team that all the time. I said, sit, he'll tell you this is your day, because you got to take care of the kids on this, you got to do this. But carve out time. And it may be a couple of hours, a couple of days. So you might do a half day on Saturday afternoon and do a half day on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be 8 hours. It could be 4 hours. But when you sit and have the conversation, you'll know what it is. It'll be clear.
Yeah. Someone asked, what scripture do you use to support that?
Sure. I'm gonna have to go because I said so much that I don't even.
It's like you say, yeah, you've made so many points.
Yeah. Keep going and I'll tell you what that is.
I loved what I think, Alex, you put this in the comments, that effectively every day can be a day of rest because we get to enter into his rest. And
amen.
And that concept, honestly, of abiding with Christ allows for just like operating like all of the time from this state and from this place. I actually haven't had the opinion that there is a day that we have to take. I think that the new covenant has done away with kind of the legalistic elements of that. So that's been my interpretation, and almost the Sabbath concept and taking a day, modeling the pattern of God in creation of the world. That's been, so my understanding is that there is no set day. We are to operate from a perpetual state and being of rest. And then the physical manifestation of that can very well pattern God. But Jesus really, the way that he operated in relation to Sabbath was just very much so the antithesis of what was the old covenant's understanding of Sabbath. That's my stance, but I could be wrong.
Well, if you go to Exodus 20:8, it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall thou labor and do all thy work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter. And then it goes on and on. And then it says, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. If you have to work on that day and they do not give you the 7th day off, then God is not going to say, well, you just take it anyway. He's about order. God is about order. So he's not going to say, well, they won't give it to you, so you just take it every so often. No. What day do you have off? Make that your Sabbath rest day. God is all about order.
Yeah.
So you have a job, you need to go to work. They will not allow you. I mean, some jobs nowadays allow you to have space at the job to go and pray, to go and have that time. I know Walmart is one of them. They have a room set up at Walmart like that. But if your job does not allow that, and they don't allow you to be off on that Sunday, then again, maybe it's Saturday that you're off or Monday. But go back to God and ask God to make it clear.
Yeah, I really love that. I think it's just a good reminder in general. What do you believe about this?
Yes.
Because here's the thing: we could have every pastor, pope, priest say one thing, and you
Exactly.
like, I actually believe God is telling me to do the complete opposite. Y'all, we better obey. That is obedience, and
Yes.
and that's the goal, is that we're living so closely. Now, granted, I would do it with a lot of care and concern. If you're going against what other people are saying, I would still do it with care. And I think that's the question. Do we have a cultivated enough relationship with God to model how he parents us, to ask him, God, what do you think about Sabbath? What was your original design, and what is your design today? And what do you have for me personally?
Right.
So I really, really love that. And then same goes with this other question that was asked, Carnella. This is a little bit of a one that's a little bit spicy, about you finding and really walking in freedom around being a pastor, when there are scriptures that seem to talk about, well, not seem to, it says, women can't speak in church. It says women need to wear head coverings. It says women, obviously, that alludes to the fact women should be pastors. So it also says a lot of other things. So in the New Testament. So I'm curious, how do the scriptures, 1 Timothy 2 verses 11 and 12 and 1 Timothy 3, people were dropping in chapters and verses here. And so how do you respond with that?
Yes, because I get this often.
I figure.
I get it often. God will use anybody to deliver his word. The Bible talks about he will use anyone he deemed necessary to deliver his word. So just because I'm a female or woman doesn't mean that I cannot be used by God to speak his word. He'll use a rock. He wants a willing vessel. That's what God wants, a willing vessel. Somebody that will stand up and say, yes, God, I'll do what you say do. And so that's how I answer it. And people ask me that all the time. How do you feel? And I say, I gave God my yes. And I'm sure of what God has said to me. I remember standing in Israel in the Garden of Gethsemane, and God saying, you're a visionary. And I asked God clearly, what is your version of visionary? And what do you want me to do with it? So you have to go to God for yourself. We are each uniquely made in his image, and he gives the instructions on what we should do and what we should not do. And so I go back to him. He said, my sheep know my voice. I go back to him. I hear his voice and I move accordingly. And I tell anybody the same thing. Go back to him. I can't tell you that he didn't call you. That's not my job. Many times we want to be judge and jury. That's not my job. I give you advice, but I'm going to always send you back to the Father.
It's so interesting. I am still not still. I don't know if we'll all ever fully ever arrive. And I'm still
Look,
doing recon on, when the words are spoken at the period of time that they were, what
right,
was applicable at that
mhm,
season versus what
right,
was meaningful for kind of a moral ethical code that is
mhm,
universal and transcends time.
right,
So I'm doing my own study. Somebody actually mentioned kind of the epistemology of things in terms of knowing, and so I
mhm,
love I do love the practice of really kind of going deep and studying where and how things began. And I think that this is just a really good reminder and even opportunity for those who are asking this question of,
yes,
well, what was actually intended here? And Carnella,
right,
the more I'm actually looking at the etymology of a word, like literally a word, the more
mhm,
I'm realizing, oh my gosh, this biblical text is so much deeper and way more nuanced, and it
right,
is actually not black and white. And so and some things I think are,
mhm,
right? And and still I think it really warrants a humility to look for
yes,
ourselves and like what was the origin of the intent and the meaning and the word choice and how has it changed. It has
mhm,
been translated so many times over, that
mhm,
it renders me humble when I look and I'm like, oh wow, I really have actually had many wrong interpretations. Even just the interpretation around effectively Psalm 91 of like, he who dwells in the shadow of the Most High will abide in the, basically the protection of the Almighty. And then my brother-in-law was killed. So it's like
right,
literally WTF God. And so there's just so much around what's the allegory, what's the hidden meaning, what was actually a black and white sentiment, what God, what are you thinking, what are you saying, what are you doing?
mhm,
It's the restoration of relationship rather
yes,
than religion and religious dogma. And this actually plays such a part into the conversation that we had around our relationship with our children. Do
mhm,
they feel safe enough to have that open pathway of communication, to
right,
come to us with their problems and with their questions and concerns and the news that they are pregnant at 16? Do they
mhm,
feel safe? And
right,
so I think it's just so important for us to maybe even consider that question. What is my existing relationship with God? Am I listening to his voice, his definition of these words, his charge to me specifically? And who
mhm,
am I to say that about somebody else? I mean, that's a scary thing. And
right,
I mean, the way that Jesus showed up with the Pharisees and
mhm,
really, I mean, delivered the truth in a way that was like, oh my gosh, I would have never thought that he would have gone to those people and talked that way
right,
because they were of the law. So
mhm.
I just think that there's a lot we don't understand.
A lot that we don't understand. And because traditionalism has allowed us to judge, even from the church, we find ourselves, I'm going to throw this on you because I've heard it, but have you studied it for yourself? And then, if you have, what is God saying for you to do? That's
Mm,
where I go. I love to say, okay, you're telling me what I need to do, but what is God asking you to do? Because we all have work and ministry that we're required to do, that He's asked us to do. What are
mm,
we doing with that?
yeah.
Do we care about those things that concerns God? Do
Mm,
we care about the least of the little ones? What do we care about? Because if my care more so is about who's preaching and who's not preaching and this, that, and the other, but I don't have a heart for the children and what's going on with the children, if I don't have a heart for the homeless people, if
mhm,
I don't have a heart for someone that's standing in need, then I'm out of line.
mm,
I'm out of line. And so I tell my own congregation, if you're riding down the street and you see a homeless person, ask God, what are you supposed to do with that person? Are you supposed to feed them? And I know everybody goes into, well, it may not be safe and this person. I say, listen to God's voice. He will tell you if it's safe, if it is safe. And if he just wants you to give them a bottle of water. But we are so busy, and we are all guilty of judging a situation without consenting God first.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of times God said, no, they're not who you think they are. Don't worry about this person. But there have been other times I've been riding down the road, and I'm not tooting my horn. I'm just using this as an example. I've been riding down the road, and God said, stop and give him food. And I've gone over and got the man food, had a wonderful conversation with the guy. And come to find out, God had already told me who he was before I spoke to him. And I said, tell me about you. And it was on a very cold day. And he said, I don't feel good today. I said, yeah, I can tell. I see you often. And he said, I said, you were a businessman, weren't you? He said, yes. He said, not in this area. I said, yeah, God told me you were a prominent businessman. All he needed was somebody to care for him that day.
Yeah, right.
But we're so busy judging. I'm going to leave that alone.
I'm so grateful for you, Carnella, and what you've offered for us. There's so much more we could talk about, and so many more questions, and there's a whole bunch more we could discuss. Yeah. Mindful of the time, we're already 18 minutes over. So thank you. I want to be respectful of your time, but thank you so much, Carnella. I know you've got your own podcast. Where can people learn more about you?
Sure. I just want to say one thing to that father. Just love your daughter. Just love on her. She needs that more than anything right now. She needs that. She just needs to know that her biological father, or whoever you are in her life, loves her. Just like our Heavenly Father needs to know, like our Heavenly Father loves us. Love on her. She needs that right now. I can be reached. I had to share that because that's where her heart is. She just wants to know that he still loves her.
Carnella, can we take a quick moment? 360 English. I just saw your comment here. Where was God when my dad suffered for 5 years? Where was he when my best friend hanged himself at 21? Where was God when another friend died in a car crash? Where was God now my older brother has cancer? And I just want to pause there, because it's so easy to talk about some of these religious questions.
Yes.
Around, well, what does the Bible say? And it's important and good. And at the same time, I know what it's like to be in a place, not to that extent with all of those tragedies, but to be at the point where I'm just so angry at God. And I give zero I give zero cares to what other people are experiencing, because I am furious. And so I'd like to talk to my friend here who is putting that out there. Where was God?
He was there all along. And we have to go through things. And it's not easy to have these conversations, because if you'd asked me this last year, I was asking the same question. And he kept reminding me, I'm here. I see you. I know exactly what you're going through. Whew, I didn't expect to go there, but it is well. He reminded me, I'm here, my child. I've never left you. I've never forsaken you. Some things you have to go through. If we look at Moses, we look at Job, we look at many of them in the Bible, they had to go through something. Jesus himself had to go through. We're not exempt. And that's not the answer that we want. But he says, I'm here. Will you stretch your hands to me? Will you just call my name? I ask him sometimes, God, why do I have to go through so much?
Yeah.
Especially as a pastor, why do I have to go through so much?
Mm.
And especially last year was one of the toughest moments of my life. And he said, I chose you. You didn't choose me. I chose you. I still love you. And as I said to that father, love your daughter. God said, I love you.
Mm.
Please don't have a bitter heart.
Mm.
Because I love you, Carnella. And he called my name.
Mm.
To the person that's asking the questions why, know that God loves you. He loves you unconditionally. And in due time, if he chooses, you will understand the why. He doesn't always tell us the why. Sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't. He just says, accept my will, and my will be done. So
Mm.
I remind you, he's there for you. And
Mm.
only he can heal your broken heart. He's close to the brokenhearted. And only he can heal and massage your heart. So my prayer right now is, Father God, massage their heart. Heal their broken heart. Lord, restore them. The name of the church is Be Restored Church. So I understand that I come into contact with people that need to be restored. For I had to be restored and continue. We all continue to be restored. So I ask God to heal your broken heart right now, to meet you right where you are. And God, they may not know the words to say, and you already know this, but God, they are in desperate need of you because they have more questions than they have answers. And so, God, only you can answer their questions. But God, I just ask you on tonight, this is not happenstance. This is not circumstance that we're on this line and this is the conversation. So you know the hearts of the people that are listening, those who are listening now, those who are listening to the replay, you know their hearts, God. I ask you to meet them right now, to do it quickly, to do it suddenly, because somebody is ready to give up, God. But I decree and declare on tonight that they will trust you like never before, that they will lean to you and you will remind them how much you love them. The love is so unconditional. He doesn't care how many times we mess up. He just say, get back up because I am with you.
Mm.
God, just massage their heart right now. Lord, let them feel your presence, Lord. Come down. Let them have an encounter with you, God. Because if it was not my encounters with you, I don't know where I would be. If it was not you speaking to me, I don't know where I would be. When I lost my grandmother, that was one of the hardest things for me. And I had to hold it in because I had to be strong for the family. So, in the process of writing, God began to reveal things to me. And He began to speak to me. Now, that was a whole 10 years later before some of the answers came. But I remember shortly after she passed away, I'm in the airport and I meet, God will send someone. He will send someone to help you through it. And I'm in the airport, and this lady I never met, we struck up a conversation, and she said to me, now I wasn't where I am now, and she said to me, It was time for her to go. That's what she said to me. And I was like, who says that to a person? Right?
Mm.
And she said it was time because y'all were too dependent on her. And God wanted her more. And we never want to hear that. And I know then I didn't want to hear it. But my grandmother had already prepared me for the day when she would pass away. She had a conversation with me. I was in my 30s, probably early 30s. And she said, I want you to understand some things. It's not going to be long now, but I'm leaving you in charge. I said, what about my mom? That's your baby girl. She said, it's going to be hard, but I'm leaving you in charge. I'll tell you everything to do. And less than 6 months later, I find myself in the hospital. And I'm sitting in the hospital on a Sunday. And my mom says to me, it's Easter Sunday now. My mom says to me, what did she tell you? Because she told me nothing. And I said, are you serious? And she said, yes. She said, you would know what to do. I'm sharing this with someone that is, the grief is so heavy and it is not making sense to you. But I know that God is a restorer because he restored me. So I know he can restore you. And in that moment, I did not want to hear anything else. But I remember that day so very well, like it was yesterday, and it's been over 20 some years now. But I couldn't process it that day
Yeah.
because I was too heavy. And it was 10 years later when he reminded me, now it's okay for you to be free.
Mm.
I tried to free you before, but you were not in a place to receive it.
Mm.
And 10 years later, the tears and the weeping came so strong. And it was like he washed every pain away. And my heart was restored. I came to tell somebody, he's restoring your heart tonight. You're asking the question, and he's going to restore you to where he's ready for you to be. Thank you, God. Where he's ready for you to be. He's been waiting. He's been waiting, and you have been holding it. You don't have to hold it anymore. Tonight, be free. I speak freedom over you. I speak healing over you. I speak a fresh anointing over you. I speak a new heart, that God will give you a new heart, that he will massage it so much that it will feel like you got a new heart. And when
Mm.
he gives you a new heart, it's so amazing. I can tell you.
Mm.
Because he gave me a new heart. The grief was so heavy.
Mm.
Reach out if you need me. I know we need to wrap up. You can reach out. It's Carnella Renee Hill. I also have a business, and he told me this. He told me to start a crisis and
Mm.
trauma. It's called C3 Impact Strategies. And I'm a chaplain, coach, counselor. I work with people who are having a hard time moving past whatever has happened in their life. Just know tonight was not happenstance. Nothing is happenstance in him.
Mm.
He stretched Christene and he stretched me. And I thank God for it.
Mm. I love the healing that you're talking about with creating a new heart after that much grief. You know, um, Y'all, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I know that this is a very different show than we normally do. Carnella, I actually had people unsubscribe 2 weeks ago because we were talking about meditation, and people were like, "What?" So, I'm sure that this is gonna be another opportunity for folks to kind of decide, like, am I willing to hear from both sides of the aisle, and am I willing to be curious? And to your point about kind of the heart change, y'all, I think that there's something about having a soft heart that where we're moldable to wanting to know what's true. And I think that, man, if we're open to knowing what's true, I think we'll know. I really, really do. I believe that. I believe that God speaks to us if we have a soft heart and we're willing to be healed. So
Mhm.
the healing process, though, it's scary to actually let go of the grief. The grief at one point or another becomes really comfortable. I felt that way
Mhm.
about my brother-in-law. It was 6 years, and I actually like wanted to keep him close, and so I didn't want to heal. And so
Mhm.
that's a whole other conversation. But y'all, I'm so grateful that you joined. Carnella, thank you so much for your time tonight. We were going in a lot of different places, and just this conversation around parenting, if we're operating from a point of lack of healing, I think our kids experience a ramification from that. So sometimes them escaping to social media and to the digital world is actually a safer place emotionally for them than perhaps their own home. So this is a good opportunity for us to look in the mirror and ask some of these questions. So y'all have a wonderful, wonderful evening. I will see you tomorrow on The Knowing Show, 9 a.m. Eastern. Carnella, thank you again. Grateful for you, my
Thank you.
friend.
Thank you.
Y'all
I
have a
appreciate you so
wonderful
much.